Hey, everybody, this is your boy John, and with me, as always, is Matt. And again, today's episode on Geeks from the Multiverse podcast is going to be part two to Back to the Future. Okay. And today we're going to be talking about the different media, like the animated show, the like different plays that were going on, and some of like the Easter eggs and different like tech that goes on as well in these movies, and even some of the interesting discussions that involved with the Back to the Future, series. So stay tuned. We're going to jump in and let's get geeky. What's up, y'all?
What's going on, everybody?
So, we have some important news. So,
Oh, sorry.
oh, sorry. This isn't SpongeBob. But, anyways, so today's episode, we're actually going to mention this real quick. We are going to be explicit starting our next episode.
What?
What? I'm sorry, guys. Yes, unfortunately, Matt and I, we've decided that we don't really feel the need to keep, I guess, keeping everything PG, right? So, unfortunately, we're trying to say this as kindly as we can, but we're trying to basically be more of ourselves, okay? And so, unfortunately, we tend to step back and we realize there's sometimes that we can be really funny. And again, when we mention like explicit, we're not trying to be like Samuel L. Jackson using like MFers like every single time. But we're gonna occasionally swear, or we might swear a little bit more. Who knows? But like again, it's gonna be more natural flowing. It's not gonna just be us just swearing all the time and doing this every single episode. But like we feel the need to just kind of express more of ourselves, right? And I mean, unfortunately, I grew up with two parents who were sailor mouths, and if you're listening, you can't deny it. And even my own brother is a sailor, has a sailor mouth and everything else. But anyways, we just wanted to mention this because we don't want you guys to think that we're not trying to stay true and genuine to ourselves, right? So, if you do have kids listening, just keep in mind, with the next episode that yes, we're gonna swear. I mean, we have occasionally sometimes swore. I know I have on the episodes and stuff like that. But keep in mind that when you're listening and when kids are listening and stuff, we're not trying to make it unkid friendly in per se, but we're trying to be more real and trying to hopefully have more conversations where we're not worried about taking a step back and making it harder to relate to you guys. You know what I mean? So Matt, what is your take on I guess this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing, whether we're clean or explicit, like I've really tried to push to us being clean, but it's really made us, kind of feel unnatural, and I think that that's really where we're kind of feeling like everything that we're saying and feeling, in what we're producing. Not that we're not producing great quality stuff, but like in the way that we're kind of explaining stuff in certain situations, we're not explaining it in the way that I would explain it or John would explain it.
Yeah,
And that's not our natural language. We're trying to make it more kind of PC and PG for everybody. And like, if we're trying to make it funny, we're trying to make it funny in a PC and a PG kind of rating way. And it just doesn't make it funny. And like John said, like, we're not trying to be like Samuel L. Jackson or, trying to make everything, kind of a sex joke or, really inappropriate where you really just can't listen because it's really just bad.
Yeah, and I mean, when we both Matt and I talk, right? A lot of times we do, we do swear, and of course, before the episodes and stuff like that, we do that as like a little tradition slash ritual, so we can get it all of our, all that stuff out of our system. But like, now we can just do it, and it doesn't have to be unnatural. It doesn't have to be, something we have to do before we do the episode, and then basically kind of like talk about, whatever that is for, you know, different episodes like DC or Marvel or like again, even doing Back to the Future, right? So like, it's one of those things that at the end of the day, we're sorry if, maybe we offend somebody, whatever. But at the end of the day, we're trying to, create good content, make it make sense, even have those funny moments, right? Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day,
We want to be real.
right, and and that's the problem with with nowadays, right? We have so many fake people all over the internet and all over media and all this other stuff. I mean, we're just trying to be real for ourselves and hopefully to the listeners and fans out there. I mean, we're not just trying to, create, content just to be, created. It's more because again, we've been passionate about it. We've been trying to like get new ideas going. And again, one day, who knows? Like, we hope that maybe one day we can become, I wouldn't say like overly famous like, some of the actors, but like at least, maybe well known or recognizable, like
Yeah.
people on the street or something, like whatever, right? But hopefully what we're trying to do is kind of make more of a change. And so if we swear, if we do those things, okay, it's not like again, it's not like Samuel L. Jackson. It's not like a lot of the comedians nowadays or whatever, but at least we're trying to be true, real, and create content that actually is worth, your guys' time and hopefully wanting to listen more. You know what I mean?
And we're still gonna look at filtering what we're saying. Obviously, we want to, be appropriate where it's needed, but we want, if we're reacting to something that's kind of ridiculous and out there, like we want to be real and we want to react how we would honestly react. We're not just gonna throw out, words just to be, you know, funny or whatever, just so that we can swear or be inappropriate.
Yeah, and I mean, especially with when we were talking about like TV shows and stuff like that. I mean, there was definitely some that there were some funny ones that we were thinking about, and I mean, I know like a
Oh,
prime example.
definitely Harley Quinn. I mean, I could explain that all day.
No, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
maybe once we get to that point, because the very next episode is when that explicit tag is you're going to start seeing it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because then, our next episode, we'll just kind of mention it now, but it's going to be on stigma. So it's going to be a kind of an interesting, point that we're now trying to make of like being explicit. And that kind of ties into hopefully like what we're doing forward a little bit too. But like for example, like when he mentioned Harley Quinn or like, for example, SpongeBob has a lot of innuendos that, a lot of people don't know unless you've actually seen it. And so there's so many things that, whether it's media or things that you listen to or whatever. There's so many things that
Yeah.
unfortunately nowadays you can hear those innuendos, and you're like, as
And you
adults,
try to explain them in the best way possible without saying what they are.
well, and
And
especially
you can't even really say them without saying what they are, and it doesn't make them any funny, any more funny or, even explain really what they are. So
well,
that's why we want to be real and we want to be able to say what we want to say. And that's really where the problem lies, because if we were to say what the cover of Harley Quinn actually looks like, Apple, Spotify, and all of those platforms automatically, even if we say, you know, the P word, I'll just say the P word, John.
okay, yes, air quotes,
i-
yep,
If we say the P word, they automatically mark us as explicit.
yeah, and I mean, and again, I understand that if
It's
you
a
have
medical term, John.
no, no, no,
Like,
I understand it's a medical term, but like for example, like I said, like if you're trying to explain this to a kid, right? You're
yeah.
good luck trying to explain it because
Oh, good luck. Yeah.
and I'm not saying that, when you have kids listening and stuff like that, there might be things that we say, and then all of a sudden you're now like, well, how do I explain this to like
Yeah.
a certain kid? Hopefully, you're, use your,
Use your best judgment.
or you're like right,
Yeah.
use your best judgment, use your instincts, like what is appropriate for that level, right? Because like there's things that hopefully later on, I know one episode that hopefully we're gonna do at some point is morality on like video games and such like that. But like hopefully that will kind of come into play where when you do have kids listening, like let's say your family or something like that, just keep in mind that what we're talking about, and depending on what kind of episode we're talking about, just keep that in mind when we're talking about it. Can you explain that to your kid, especially whatever age they're at, and what is their mental capacity in that moment to actually understand what we're talking about, and actually hopefully you can explain it. But if you can't, then it's probably something you should listen to on your own, and just to be honest, right?
Yeah.
But, as we're talking about this, why don't we really get into the nitty gritty, man? Because I feel like we got to talk about Back to the Future here
So
again.
yeah, I mean, Back to the Future, we all know like there's obviously part one, part two, and part three. And again, like we said in part one, if you haven't listened to part one, go back, listen to part one, and then come back and listen to this one.
And then if you want, maybe go check out that ASMR video that Matt was talking about.
um, but if you've already listened to part one, like we all know, Back to the Future is a trilogy. There's 3 movies. And the first one, like they go back in 55. Marty's parents, there obviously was a change where they didn't meet, and that's what they're fixing. And Back to the Future 2, he goes into the future because, Marty's future son was going to jail and they were hoping to change his future so that he didn't go to jail.
And also, I want to mention like Biff is a big part of this one because of the fact that he meets his, I think it's like his older self. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
his older self.
he meets like his future. Well, he meets like the future one meets the past one.
Well, right, but the
And
problem is like, yeah, his future self talks to his past one and says, "Here, have this almanac," and it
yeah,
entirely changes the future. And of course, in this movie, Marty is Biff's was it son or was it stepson? Or I think it was his
sounds like
son
step. Yeah,
or something like that. And like it was weird because like basically,
that's when they go back to 85. Like Biff is married to his mom,
yeah,
basically, and
yeah, and it's
yeah,
abusive and there's
they're
all
like
kind of different things.
a casino and like yeah,
But again,
and
it's a great movie. You should check it out.
and they go back to 55 to basically get the almanac from Biff in the past, which is the future Biff gave it to the past Biff. And the third movie is when, Doc leaves, he gets transported back to 1885 and Marty goes back to 1885 to rescue Doc because he actually dies in 85.
Well, he
1885.
does, but he also doesn't want to go back with Marty because
Well,
he
that's
wants to
at
live.
the
Well, right, and
yeah.
that yes, yes, spoiler. So, but he does end up staying in 1885, and of course, Marty goes back to 1985 where he originally started.
Right.
But I mean, again, all these movies, if you again, you haven't seen it, stop what you're doing, go watch it
Yeah.
right now, and don't listen to
Stop,
this.
stop, like literally stop this podcast. Like hit the pause button right now. Go listen to a podcast on flowers, shopping. I don't know, like ASMR where somebody's looking at a microphone, like something else. Like go watch the movies and then come back and hit play.
And welcome back. But
Welcome back to this podcast.
so, but so we're what it's interesting that you know Back to the Future created other content besides just
They
the
actually
movies.
did, yeah.
And so one of them, which I didn't know this, I didn't realize that they made a short film.
I knew about the short film. I haven't seen it though. But I knew about I knew about the short film. I just haven't seen it.
So I'd be interested to see it, but I mean, I guess as the title says, it's Doc Brown saves the world. So I don't know, maybe it does like this kind of like alternative maybe event. Maybe, I don't know. Again, if you've seen it, let us know because I'd be curious because it's interesting how if Doc Brown apparently dies in 1885, how is he saving the world in 2015? You know what I mean? Like I don't understand that.
I don't know.
And that just seems like a time loop that I
And
don't
I mean, this
understand.
thing was made in 2015, so um, who knows?
I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, there's so many things about the trilogy that we've talked about a little bit, but like looking at all these like different media that has happened, to basically make a movie based on
So, from IMDb,
okay,
the official explanation of this short film
okay,
is in order to save the world from a nuclear holocaust in 2045.
oh wonderful, we're going Terminator mode. Here we go.
Doc Brown must push the technological age back at least 50 years, preventing Mattel hoverboards and Mr. Fusion from being created.
So it's crazy that the fact that in 2015 they showed hoverboards in part 2, but now because of whatever is happening, they now have to push it back to basically, let's say, what was it, 1965? Or, well, no, actually, it would have been like 1975 in that sense. If it's 50 years, right? Because 1975 to 2050, am I right? Or I feel like, no, I feel like that's right. Yeah, no.
Well,
Is
it was
it
made. I mean,
65 or is it 75? I'm losing track
I
now.
mean, it was made in 2015. So, I mean,
No, it's 75. Okay. No, I'm right.
yeah.
It's 75. But
So, I mean, the writers of this was Bob Gale, Glenn Sanders, and Robert Zemeckis. So,
oh, of course.
and the director was Glenn Sanders and Robert Zemeckis. And
Well, at least they brought the original people that did, Back to the Future
um,
though.
the Christopher Lloyd. I mean, it looks like Christopher Lloyd was actually in it.
I mean, he
And
definitely would have been a lot older in this, but yeah.
so, I mean, it's one of those movies like it kind of, I guess, pushes that narrative a little bit farther because, in Back to the Future 2, the Mr. Fusion was on the back of the DeLorean, and that's what was, you put the trash
Yeah, the
in the
juicer,
back of the
yeah.
DeLorean to fuel the DeLorean instead of using plutonium.
Right. Right, it was a more recyclable
Yeah.
kind of way of doing it, which makes sense. I mean, I just I don't know. I mean, remember how we were just talking about how they shouldn't recreate, certain things, and of course these guys were like, "Ah, let's just do something with
But the
just
thing is,
him
I mean,
though."
if Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis created this, then it's part of the story. I mean,
I mean,
I guess
well, hold on, is it
that's
canon?
if Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis wrote it, then it's canon.
Okay, I just had to ask because would it make
It's
sense?
canon. I mean, they wrote Back to the Future, so it's canon.
All right.
There was also an animated series, Back to the Future. They went for 2 seasons in 91 and 92.
The
There
question is, did they have the actual voices of
I believe Michael J. Fox supplied the voice for Marty. I don't know if Christopher Lloyd also supplied the voice. I didn't look that far. I didn't go down that rabbit hole.
I'd be curious to watch it and see where it's at. Like, I'm wondering if it's on Prime or if
Yeah,
it's
I don't
somewhere
know. I
like that
mean,
too.
they do have a lot of things on Prime. I didn't really look to see where it was at. I mean, I know they have an Ace Ventura
I mean, I know they had
a-
it. Yes, yeah.
animated series, but I didn't really look that far. But there is a couple theater, Back to the Futures. There was a play in 2015, and one of the things that they, Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis actually did was they created Back to the Future the musical in 2020, which I don't know if they're still doing it, but that was an actual um from what I read was an actual way to kind of push that narrative of like if there was ever a fourth movie and to kind of like overview kind of the movies itself and to kind of celebrate Back to the Future, the musical is the way that they would have done it.
So I just actually looked this up real quick. So I looked at the animated series, and apparently the cast. Okay, so Christopher Lloyd was in it.
Oh,
So
okay.
it wasn't Michael J. Fox. So he wasn't in this. But interestingly enough, the guy who plays Homer Simpson,
Okay.
so Dan Castaneda, yeah, that guy. He looks like he would play like a younger version of Doc Brown. So there's a couple, and actually, ironically enough, Bill Nye the Science Guy is actually in this show.
Oh,
So
okay.
little fun fact, I didn't know that, but it doesn't look like
Doc Brown and Bill Nye.
Bill, Bill Nye the Science Guy had, of course, be in the show. I haven't I
Interesting.
haven't seen where you could watch it yet, but yeah, it doesn't look
Okay.
like it's probably something you could watch it on personally right now. But yeah, with the play though, I think it's an interesting idea to have like a musical and then of course a play and stuff like that. But why would you make this movie into a musical personally? You know what I mean? Like I don't think it really does it any justice.
I mean, why not?
I mean, but okay, is Gail and Zemeckis like are they actually allowing this to happen or did like just random people who wanted to direct a play, say, "Hey, you know what? Can we just use it?" And they just say, "You know what? Forget the directors that actually made the series," and they're just like, "You know what? We're just going to make a play." We're gonna make a musical out of this. Like, how do you? I just don't see the like Back to the Future being singing. The only thing I could see singing is like when Marty goes back in like 1955 and he's on the stage and he's playing "Go Johnny, go go go" like that. You know what I mean? Like, but that's it. Like, there's no other times where I remember him actually singing and doing all that other stuff. You know what I mean? That's kind of weird. How would you have a musical, especially for a movie like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, the one thing Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis actually did this play, did the musical. So I know that the actual
Oh, so
musical is done by them.
okay.
So
I didn't realize if they weren't doing it, then I'm like, okay, well,
yeah,
that's
no, the musical is the play is I think not done by them.
okay.
As far as I know, but the musical part of it is done by them, and I think it was mainly done as like a kind of a tribute to kind of bring it to, you know, more mainstream and to kind of celebrate, Back to the Future kind of a thing.
I mean, that's good, but like, I just don't see why you'd want to do that. You know what I mean? Because like at the end of the day, I just don't see it being like a big hit. I understand it came out in 2020, but it's one of those things that I just don't see it being, as successful as the movies. You know what I mean? Because like a musical or a play, like you look at Wicked or Rent or a lot of these like famous, you know, theater, or like really Broadway shows, like those are the ones you want to go see, or like Hamilton or something like that. Like those are plays you want to go see because they do a good job of the singing and acting and everything else that goes into it. But to make a musical, I don't know. I just don't think it makes it worth my time to go do that. Um, I'm actually I was kind of looking something up too, but apparently the only way to watch Back to the Future the cartoon is you have to buy the DVD on Amazon or eBay, and there's a box set. I don't know if you can find it, but apparently you can. If you were that serious on watching the animated series, you could probably just buy the DVD and go watch it. I don't know exactly how much it is, but I don't know if it's worth my time to go watch it though.
I mean, if all else fails, you probably could just look up the episodes on YouTube, and
I
you
mean, that's
probably
true.
could just
Yeah.
watch the whole series. I mean, there's only 2 seasons, so it's not like there's a whole lot of
I
episodes,
I
but
want to say it's like 26, I think is in
you
total.
probably could watch the whole show probably on YouTube if you really wanted to watch
Yeah, if you really wanted to
the
bootleg it
show.
and
But
watch it.
beyond, animated and short films and movies and theater, they did. I think one of the biggest things that a couple of the biggest things that they've done were books and comic books. I think those were the 2 biggest things because like they really pushed that narrative of where the story was going with the comic books and with the books.
I mean, I know that we were talking about it a little bit before, recording this too. Is I know my dad came down here too, and we were talking about how they made a video game, and it was on the Atari
They've made
2600.
a lot of a lot of different video games.
Well, right, but I mean, I would have thought like, I mean, granted, it's probably on the same level as like ET when it came to like the gameplay, but
Yeah, I mean it probably sucks.
but I mean, it's interesting that
It's
because of
classic, but it sucks.
no, but like the fact that of course, like board games, card games, like all these other things that they wanted to do to like
Yeah.
distribute it. It's interesting that they did that, but I don't.
I
I
mean
don't think it would have done well with all
they
that stuff.
probably made a Monopoly version of Back to the Future.
Oh, they probably
They
did.
probably made like,
Life.
different board games. I know that they've made particular, Back to the Future puzzle, different puzzle games for Back to the Future. So that, I think the overall kind of thing for the media concept of all of these different things is like there's a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you, it's, I mean, granted, okay, like Back to the Future.
Music, movies, TV shows, like there's a lot of
So
different things.
what I was gonna say was that it's not on the same level as Star Wars, right? Or if it's not on the same level as Marvel, but it's one of those show or really the movies wise, it's more of a cult classic that of course people love it and they love the nostalgia of it, but it's not unfortunately on that same level as Star Wars or Marvel because it's not like it's continued and they've even said they don't want to continue
Yeah,
further.
I think it's one of those movies like where you kind of look at it and you go, "Well, these are classic movies and they kind of stand on their own." And they've made content and they've made their own stuff. And could you make, you know, a really, interesting video game
Oh, especially nowadays? Yeah, absolutely.
nowadays from Back to the Future? You definitely, I mean,
I mean, VR, man.
could you make an open world, role playing game like Far Cry for Back to the Future
Oh my god, yeah.
with Marty and Doc Brown and all of this? Like, you definitely could.
I mean, imagine if it was VR. Like, imagine if you were playing in VR. I feel like that would be really cool. I mean, you might get like a couple
You
of like
definitely could
headaches.
get like a really cool video game out of it. You know, as far as like, movies or TV shows, like it wouldn't do it any justice.
It's just not on the same level. You know what I mean? Like,
As
I
as
think
far
that's the
as
point.
as far as animated, I could see animated.
Maybe a
I
more
I
revamped version, yeah, if they
I I
wanted to do
I could
adventures.
I could see, animated where you wouldn't have to have Michael J. Fox involved necessarily, but
Or
you could have his likeness.
well, and that's on that whole debate on the whole AI thing. But I mean, granted, can you do that with animated? That's a whole nother
Yeah.
debate.
And that's a whole nother debate. So I mean, the one thing in particular that like I think Back to the Future has done that like most movies I think don't do now is part 2 and part 3 were filmed back to back.
Which was amazing because the fact that, actually in the 3rd movie, it shows like a synopsis of what's happening in the 2nd one in the beginning of the 3rd film. And you're right. I mean, a lot of times, like, I mean, I'm gonna
I
mention
mean, maybe
Star Wars.
Star Wars,
I
yeah.
was thinking Star Wars
Yeah.
because of like, what they do is of course the yellow title, little screen text basically, but it kind of gives you that little quick synopsis. But like other than that, like there's not a lot of movies that like, hey, let me just show you what happened on, this, movie that just happened a little bit
Yeah.
ago. But the fact that they did it back to back was amazing because you're right. A lot of films
It
do
makes
not
it
do that
really
now.
cohesive because like when if you really think about part 2 and part 3, they filmed it when you think back to back, like when they were filming part 2, they were also filming scenes for 3. When they were filming part 2 for 3, part 3 for 2, like
Right. And so
there wasn't a separation. So when they were filming scenes, they were filming for 3, they were filming for 2. So it was one cohesive film for both movies,
yeah.
and they had to have 2 different sets for both movies, and that's where it really gets cohesive because they can really, I mean, yeah, when they're filming a movie, like they're not going like scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. They might like film scene 72 and then film scene 76 and 26 and
Yeah, they have to jump back and forth at
yeah.
that time. But yeah.
But you're filming 2 different movies at the same time, and it makes it, those 2 movies are 100% cohesive, and it makes it so that like if you film those 2 movies separately, I think it would have been 2 separate movies.
I agree, and I mean, if you look at how how well those movies did, right? Especially the way they did it. So imagine if like they're filming again both the second film and then the third film. They of course they released the second one, and I think it was what like a couple years later they released the third film. But like
So, yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, 85 was the first one, and Back to the Future 2 was actually in 89,
okay, and then it
and then
was
3 is
1990.
1990.
Okay, so it was like basically back to back for each year, but it was nice that I mean, granted, yeah, so they had to do a little bit of planning before they did 2 and 3, but they at least had some plans to move forward.
Yeah.
To basically say, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna do 85, and then we're gonna take some time, think about how we're gonna do 2 and 3." And they're like, "Hey, you know what? Why don't we just do it back to back?" And then basically, of course, they had that much time to like to figure that out, and they of course released it in '89 and then did it in '90, and you're like, "Hey, perfect, no problem." You know, I will admit though, I think it's very interesting how there's a lot of different Easter eggs and different like little weird things inside of these films.
Oh,
Because
there's definitely a lot. I mean, one of the, I guess one of the disputed facts, because it's really hard to really confirm, I guess, this one because this movie was made in the 80s.
right,
You have to go like, oh yeah, there's digital versions of it. You can no, you have to go back to the film,
yes,
like
the original
the
negative of
the
the film.
the negative of the actual film to verify it. And when you go and do that, you actually might actually damage the negative.
So I'm wondering, could you remake said negative? Like if you just remade the negative, could you at least maybe take that copy of it
No,
and then
well,
check?
because the negative was filmed by a camera, so you can't. I don't know if you can really remake a negative.
I'm just wondering because like
So I think once you have a negative, like that's the only actual copy of the said movie that you have. So if you have one copy of Back to the Future 2 that's on a negative, that's the only said copy you have. So if I'm telling you, hey, there's a shot of Eric Stoltz's hand punching Biff in this one scene in episode, in part 2, but we need to confirm it, and the only way to confirm it is to look at the negative. And then you tell me, well, if we look at that negative, we're going to 100% damage it.
I mean, I agree. I agree that, when you come to the very first original like negative of this film, when it comes to value, I mean, think about it now. I mean, the movie came out in '89. It's
Yeah.
been what, almost 40 years, give or well, yeah,
I mean,
about 40,
it's
about 40 years. Yeah,
about
so
four, a little under,
little under 40,
a
right?
couple under, but
But yeah,
I mean, that's where the dispute is, and it's exactly that. I mean, there's a shot of, Marty punching Biff, and we all know the scene where Marty punches Biff, right? We all know that scene. But in this scene, it's not the dispute is that it's not actually Michael J. Fox's hand, that it's Eric Stoltz's hand.
I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, because we talked about it in the very first part one of the series so far, that yes, Eric Stoltz originally was casted
And he
and was
filmed a
doing,
lot of scenes.
which it very well could have been. I'm not saying it wasn't. What I'm saying is, it is very hard to know if that was his original hand or not.
There's no way to verify like what scenes, if Eric Stoltz was in a scene where you didn't see his face that they used in the original film, like if they used his hand to punch Biff, if it was Michael J. Fox or if it was Eric Stoltz, unless they go to the original negative and they look and they see multiple cuts of that said scene, but then they end up ruining
Right, the original negative,
the
which
original negative, which
decreases the value of the film and so on and so forth, which it makes sense, which
Yeah.
why they wouldn't want to do that.
so they wouldn't actually do that. And so I mean it kind of I guess remains a dispute whether it's a shot of Eric Stoltz's hand or whether it's Michael J. Fox.
I mean, so I will say this next one is kind of a more obvious one because, like, if you've seen at least the
It's
very
really
first
awkward.
movie,
This is a really awkward
this is
one.
very awkward.
Yeah.
So basically, it's the romantic relationship between Marty and his mother, Lorraine. Okay, and the fact that these both Zemeckis and Gale were saying it was very difficult to write these particular scenes. Okay, so Gale
I
and
believe it.
Zemeckis, yes, because they attempted to take the concept as far as possible and also to keep the audience on edge. Because again, mind you, yes, incest is not something that should be allowed, right? It's that like
Yeah, I
that
mean,
weird.
I think most people would agree that like when you watch the scenes of them in the car and you're like, no, don't don't. I think most people don't want that to happen at all.
Right, and then again, the fact that they basically had to make sure people believe that Lorraine, would basically stop the relationship, and then she remarks the kissing of Marty, and it feels like kissing her brother. Okay, so like first off, that's weird as
Yeah,
hell.
that
Like,
is. I mean, can I just say like that one comment in that movie? It makes you kind of like. I mean, at first you kind of play it off and you're like, I get it, like because in the scene it's like, oh, it feels like kissing my brother because you're like, oh, because that's your son, like it makes sense. When you actually think about it,
like, wait a minute, did
it's
you
like
actually
it's like
kiss your
wait a
brother?
minute, have you kissed your brother?
Like, and you're right. Like after so many years, you're like, wait a minute, did she? Is she saying that she's kissed her brother, or
How do you know what it feels like to kiss a brother?
Right. I'm like, are you saying that you have, or are you saying that, maybe you've kissed him by accident or something like that, and just like, ew, it's like that weird feeling. Like, I don't know. Like, but again, it makes you wonder if that was their real intention, or if that was something played off, like that little innuendo or
I
some
think,
sort.
I think that they were just kind of playing it off, but I mean, it's just that phrase like, ah, it feels like kissing my brother. It's like, say what?
So, and it's funny because I'm looking at it now, is like, Gail jokingly said no, basically said no one asked how she could make that comparison, but audiences would accept it because they did not want the relationship to happen. So the fact that, he had to explain that piece, and he had to be like, no, 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 I don't think they would have gotten it at that time. It's like, so you're saying that basically she was trying to, maybe intentionally kiss her brother or something. I don't know. Like, it just seems weird that
I
he had
think,
to explain that piece.
I mean, I think, coming from the 80s,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Okay. Coming from your era as a
com-
kid. Yes.
coming from the 80s, I mean, it's not uncommon for family members to kiss. I'm gonna throw that out there right now. Like, it's not uncommon for family members to kiss. So like, yes. I mean, like, obviously, I've grown up in a household with 3 other brothers.
Okay. Well,
So
mind
we
you,
we we did not kiss each
I
other.
figured you'd pick fights with each other, and you'd probably beat the
So
crap out of
yes,
each other.
we did fight a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say like we fist fought, but
Yeah. Okay.
but we definitely did not like kiss each other.
No, I wasn't kissing my brother
But
either.
I would say, maybe like, if we were like leaving or something, maybe like a hug, or, like a
Yeah.
bro
Yeah.
hug or something, like something like that. But like,
No, I guess my real question is like,
if I had a sister, it might be like, hey, I love you,
would you kiss her?
like
Okay, my question is, would you kiss her on the lips, or would you kiss her on the head, or would
I
you kiss her on the cheek?
I would probably kiss her on the cheek or the head. But I think that's the innocence that Lorraine is referring to. Like,
Yeah.
not necessarily like, I think as a society right now, when we watch it and we see this, and even this, like, kind of, you know explanation, we kind of look at it as like the sexual aspect of it, like
Oh
her kind
yeah.
of like saying like, oh, it's like kissing my brother, and we kind of go, oh, you're kissing your brother,
Like, how dare you?
how
Like,
dare you? But like, if I went to go kiss my brother, like, I mean, right now, like, if I went to go see my brother, like, I might kiss him on the cheek and say, hey, like, hey, I miss you, like, see you later, like.
I mean, I don't kiss my brother at all. I mean, I mean, he just basically
But
would
you
be like a
probably
hug.
see him more often. I don't see my brother very
Well,
often,
yeah, that's
so
true. Yeah.
it's one of those things. Like, I might just give him a hug and be like, "Hey, see you later," and that might be the thing. But like, if I had a sister, that might be a different story,
I
and
mean,
it
yeah.
might be like a kiss on the cheek, or it might be like something different. But it would be like, if all of a sudden, like, I'm making out with somebody, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it's like kissing my brother, like.
I mean, so I'm gonna throw this out there, right? So, like, I know in my family, you know, I would say more like my grandmother, my mother, and stuff like that. So, of course, like, I've kissed her, on the cheek, and kissed her on the head, and it's happened by accident. Sometimes he just kissed me on the lips, and I'm just like, I don't understand why that had to be a thing,
Right.
but like it's happened, and I'm pretty sure my wife has mentioned to me, a couple times. She's like, "Why did you kiss them on the lips?" I said, "I didn't do that. That was kind of like it just happened, and I didn't, I wasn't the initiator of this whole thing." But like, I agree, it can look a little weird, but I think it was more. Um, I want to say it's like I wouldn't say like culture, but I think it's more like it depends on the family dynamics, right? So it happened and it was whatever. I mean, shit. I mean, excuse my language. Uh, you know, my dad accidentally. I think it was a couple times. I'm pretty sure there was a time where he kissed me on the lips too, and I'm just like, "What just happened?" And it was a little weird at first because I'm
Yeah.
not gonna lie, it's my dad, but I'm like, and he's giving me a kiss on the cheeks or like whatever, and I've replicated it on whatever. But like most of the time, we give each other hugs. We don't like do that, and there was a couple times I do admit that it was kind of weird because like of course growing up, it was kind of like you're doing that as like a family thing. Again, I have a lot of Um, of course, Irish and like Sicilian background and stuff like that. But like it just I think it was just more that family dynamic, and I understand like, when you're looking at Lorraine and you're looking at how, she's basically she doesn't realize it's her own son.
Well,
And
especially in 1955. Like it's not in 85, it's not in 2015, it's 1955. So you're talking a completely different time.
well, yeah, and of course different cultures, different, eras, so there's like different ways of going about how you do things, and
Right.
especially in 1955, like,
Yeah.
it's a different era, like you wouldn't expect, certain people to do those things back then, but like now it's like, oh, okay, not a big deal. It's not a,
Yeah.
taboo or something like that, because that's
Yeah.
what I would think it would be. Um, but I will say this, Matt, the fact that you showed me this was surprising that I didn't believe this. So Matt, before the episode, showed me a video of a trailer that Universal did, and I didn't believe him. But this was a little spoof of what they did, but they created a trailer for Jaws 19. Okay, and I don't know exactly when it came out because we
I
looked it
think this
up.
was for Back to the Future Day, which was October 21st,
Of
2015.
2015. Yeah,
And they created this trailer kind of as a promotional thing for that day. But
it honestly is a funny, like, trailer because it goes really in depth on how many Jaws there were and, like, what the
well, and
differences
that was
were.
the advertisement in the movie itself. Like there was a the shark coming down, and
Yeah, and, like, doing its
it
thing.
was a whole hologram thing where he was like scared of that shark,
No,
eating
yeah,
him.
like no, but
It was a hologram.
the fact that I'll read this real quick. So, like, in the actual trailer, the narrator, he literally says in Jaws 19, it says, "This time, it's really, really personal."
This time
So,
it's really really personal.
okay, I'm glad you had to repeat everything I
Yeah.
just said. I'm sorry not saying like a
I had to
narrator, but
say it in like the movie voice. You know
okay,
what I mean?
well, the point
Yeah.
is like the fact that he had to like say really, really twice and then personal, like like the
It's
first.
really ridiculous, and then the trailer's not anything really special. I mean, he basically just kind of like goes through and like, you know, says like Jaws 1 was this, Jaws 2 was that, Jaws 3 was this, Jaws 4, Jaws 5, Jaws 6. I mean, he goes through
All the Jaws.
every single Jaws up until he gets to 19, like Jaws 17, Cyber Jaws. He goes through like all these different
Yeah, and
Jaws.
it gets ridiculous. I mean, every single one of them is so
Yeah,
like a spoof of each other. It was funny when I saw this.
Russian Jaws,
Yeah, like a
like Russian shark, Ivan Sharkovsky.
yeah, Sharkovsky, and then there was like a like Jaws and all this other stuff. But like, it's interesting that they had to like create it for the movies, which
Yeah,
is cool. But I just you don't actually believe it or not. I don't think there's many movies that, or like at least like film
would
studios
go
that
like
would do
above and
that.
beyond. Yeah,
Exactly,
would go
to do
above and
that
beyond. Yeah,
because it's very rare that you'd see a
yeah.
movie or anything do that.
And what's funny is like Universal and Mattel did produce an advertisement for the hoverboard.
Which, if you haven't seen what hoverboards look like, they're definitely not the same ones that you see in the movie because those hoverboards in the movie, oh my god, like I would if that was a real thing, like the way it's projected,
Yeah,
I mean, they have made I would say they probably have made some prototypes similar to Back to the Future, but
I
it's
mean they're
not
not the
as
same. Yeah, they're not the same as.
no, Back to the Future, but what I'm saying is like the nowadays it honestly it's stupid. I mean, the fact that it's just two wheels and you're basically pushing your body forward to then move. It's like, okay, that's not the same idea. It's basically a
Right,
skateboard that's floating in air and it's like, when he's going across that pond,
right.
like it was like cool, but at the same time I'm just like that would be a hoverboard. Like that would be something that I would like personally like, you know what, screw the skateboard. I would rather go learn how to
Yeah.
go on a hoverboard instead.
Well, and there was a whole hoax with the hoverboard. Robert Zemeckis on one of the behind the scenes, featurettes actually said that the hoverboards that were used in the movie were actually real,
Okay. Okay.
and they were not yet released to the public due to, and this is like quoted, due to parental complaints regarding safety.
Okay, I disagree with this because there is no way that in the
Well,
90s
footage, it was just footage of real hoverboards were featured in the extras of the DVD release.
I just I
And so a number of people were, thought Zemeckis was telling the truth and requested them from toy stores,
I just
and
yeah.
it just was it became like a thing.
I just like okay, the thing is now if that was the case, then we would actually see those hoverboards today. You know what I'm saying? Like especially with
Well,
nowadays.
I mean, he totally was lying. I mean, he totally was just like, fabricating
Of course he
truth
was fabricating, but the point is what I'm saying is like there was
just
if
to be. I think he was just trying to be funny, not thinking like people were like going to take him serious.
no, but like
And maybe in the actual footage, like that they were releasing in the DVD, maybe I don't know if he was intending to release real footage of hoverboards.
no, but like what I'm saying is like if that was really the case, then they would have actually produced them in real life in let's say the late 80s, early 90s. They would have done that already and they would have actually probably produced more now, especially in 2023, and we wouldn't have that
No,
stupid hoverboard version of what we have. That's all I'm going to say.
yeah, I mean technology wasn't there, but a couple of the other things, I think Pepsi actually produced a, because in the future, as we know, like 85, Pepsi had Tab,
Right.
right? So Pepsi actually produced a limited run of Pepsi Perfect, which was in the 2015 future in Back to the Future.
Right.
And so they actually produced Pepsi Perfect leading up to Back to the Future Day, in which they actually sold out before the day actually happened.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, too, in that, I'm pretty sure in that scene or like somewhere in that too, the Cubs won the World Series.
Yeah, which no, I think the the team that actually won the World Series, that there was no actual team that won a World Series from that city. Like in real life. I mean.
So I'm actually going to look it up because I couldn't remember if who actually won the World Series in 2015.
So while you look that up, I'll talk about the Nike Air Mags, which were the self-lacing shoes that Marty was wearing, and those shoes Nike actually made. And those shoes were, um when they actually made them, they did self-lace, but the self-lacing was so slow that I guess it didn't really matter that they self-laced at that point, because you could just probably lace them yourself.
Well,
But
yeah,
they
yeah,
did actually make those sneakers like exactly to the specifications that they were in the movie.
yeah. And I think with the Nike, shoe that they did, I mean, it was cool. And I think they, with Nike now, trying to recreate it, I think what the problem is to try to have a motorized, system to basically tie your own shoes in a sense, be more lazier as Americans. That's great. Um, it's a great idea, but I don't know how well that would have been, made if that's the case because it was so slow. I know it really wasn't that popular, and so like it is a cool idea, but at the same time, it's just not worth my time to go get shoes that basically I could just tie my shoes quicker than this thing trying to lace
Yeah.
my shoes up.
I mean, it's kind of like when the Matrix came out and they started making that cell phone. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
everybody wanted that cell phone that you just hit the button and the bottom came out, and like everybody was like, "Oh, that's so cool! Like I want that cell phone."
Uh,
Everybody wanted it,
well, yeah, but then of
and
course,
then like maybe a year, if that,
yeah, it just
it was
wasn't.
just poof gone.
So real quick, so I figured it out. So in 2015, the Kansas City Royals won the World Series. It wasn't until 1 year later that the Cubs won the World Series. It was in 2016 when they won, so they weren't that far off. But it
No,
was just,
they weren't that far.
I mean, it would have been cool though if the Cubs actually won in 2015 though, because I would have been like, hey, look, that actually came true.
Yeah, well,
But
I mean, there were some things that they actually did get right in Back to the Future, and these things actually kind of blow my mind.
well, yeah,
To be honest, because some of these things, when you actually think about the year that these movies were made, and a lot of these actually come from Back to the Future Part 2, which came out in 89.
okay. So I realized it was not 40 years. It was, I think we're at 34 years right now. So
So one of the things is, the use of unmanned flying drones for news gathering
Well, I mean, that's not that far off, but I mean, basically, we use drones now for a lot of
for
things.
a lot of things. Not
Yes.
just news, but we use them for a lot of things. I think one of the biggest, you know, things that they've shown in part 2 was a widescreen flat panel television mounted on the wall showing multiple channel viewing.
So, yes, I mean, technically, if you look at a flat screen now, like an HDR, like a real nice one, y- could you watch, let's say, like a couple different things going on? Sure. This one was showing in the movie, like I don't know how many, I guess like 50, but it's quite a bit that this what Marty's son was doing. He was looking at like I think it was like 10 or 15 different channels and he was watching it all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, he was selecting multiple channels at the same time, but like, I mean, with technology now, like you can do picture in picture where, I mean, I don't know how many different channels you can watch at the same time. I mean, I think depending on like the cable or like the programming that you have, like you can probably watch, you know, two, maybe three channels at the same time. Um, but it's just, I think it's just the fact that like in '89, if you wanted a TV, one, it wasn't widescreen, and two, it wasn't flat panel. Like TVs were tubes, and if you have a tube TV, you can't get a tube TV flat.
No. And also think about how heavy that thing was.
Yeah, and some of the time, like if you had a big, TV, it didn't just come as a TV; it came in a giant, mounted, kind of a cabinet.
It was like a cabinet stand, whatever you want to call it. But
And sometimes, like, it came with an 8-track player and a radio, a record player, and, like, it had, like, all kinds of different things attached to it. Like, it wasn't just a TV, but you can get just the TV, but, like, the tube TVs, like, if you're kind of a new millennial and you don't know what they are, go look at a TV with a huge back on it.
and that would be a tube TV.
That would be a tube TV.
I mean, it's crazy because when you look at how TVs, how they were, even back in like let's say the 50s and then even now, right? The fact that you could literally mount them, you could have, brackets that can move the TV around and do all
Yeah.
this other stuff and right. And so like I mean, I actually just saw a commercial for it was a Samsung TV. It was a Disney edition, mind you, but it looked like a picture frame. But it was literally you could I think it was like a 65-inch TV or something like that. You could mount it on the wall, and it came with, like, these little metal brackets that looked like a picture frame. Guess what? They weren't having that in '89 or even
No,
earlier than
they
that.
weren't having that, and to have, like, a TV that displayed multiple channels at the same time, like, when you watched TV in '89, you watched one channel. If you wanted to watch a different channel, you had to change the channel.
Wait, 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 you actually had to get up and change said
Yeah.
channel.
So you couldn't watch 2 channels at the same time. So this was, like, kinda revolutionary, and the other thing that, when you're in 2015 in, the McFly's home, they had smart home technology.
I mean, look at how Google Nest, Alexa, all these different
Yeah.
products that have come out and
You can control your
entire
home
house.
temperature,
Yeah, you control literally your
your
entire
lights.
house. I mean, there's ways, for example, I think there's smokers, there's grills now, there's different appliances that
Yeah.
can be Bluetooth that you can probably program into the Alexa and say, "Hey, turn on my smoker."
You have refrigerators that can order your groceries. I
I
mean,
mean, yeah.
look at this. You can buy a refrigerator that can actually order your groceries for you. Like it can actually like you put in the food that you buy and it tells you what you're low on and you tell it buy this food and it will order and it will come to your door. I kid you not. I kid you not.
I've never seen this, but I'd be really interested to try it.
I kid you not. And not only will it do that, but like you can actually push a button and the front of the refrigerator will go clear and it will show you what's in your refrigerator without even having to open it. Like,
That is insane.
seriously,
That's
like,
insane.
you're crazy.
I mean, you know what? It's okay, Matt. I understand.
I you
You're gonna
know,
buy that refrigerator.
I just have a basic one where you have to actually open the door to get in it, you know?
Same here too.
I just have a real fridge.
I
But,
mean, so
going into some of the things like hands-free video games, like
VR.
VR, we're at that stage. Video chat systems. Hello, FaceTime,
I mean,
Google
Skype.
Hangouts, Skype, like that's where we're at. Uh, talking animated billboards. Granted, in New Hampshire, we don't have a lot of these, but like
No.
you go to California, you go to the
Japan.
UK, you go to Japan, they have billboards that literally look like they're moving outside and around the building. Like crazy kind of billboards.
Right. And then you even look at the next one, like wearable technology. Look at our smartwatches now.
Smartwatches, yeah.
Look at, I mean, Google, what was it, Google Plex or like the glasses? Oh, Google Glasses, my bad. So,
Well,
like,
and that's like the head-mounted displays. Like they
yeah,
showed, Marty was wearing these. Like I think, well, I don't know if it was Marty, if it was his sister.
I think it was Marty. I think it was
Like he
Marty that
had
had
these
it
like
on.
visors that showed like kind of like I guess the game that he was playing.
Right. And I mean, and again, I mean, you look at virtual reality, it's kind of a similar effect there because, putting on, let's say, the Oculus or I can't even think of the other ones off the
It
top
was
of my
like
head, but like, but yeah,
the Google Glass or like some of these glasses that they made. They still make them now, where you can actually see like the things that are on your phone and
yeah.
some of the other like data points that like they're you can actually see. And on some fronts, there are companies that actually do make contact lenses that are digital.
This is kind of like a little side topic, but it reminds me. I really hope this doesn't come down to it, but like, imagine installing a microchip into your eye, basically, and like it projects like your phone and like the screen and everything else. It's kind of like I think of like more Futurama in this case because they've done that, but like
That's the first step for Skynet.
I
I'm
mean, it
just
is
saying.
technically the first step, but like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's crazy to the point where like we're getting so technologically advanced that I wouldn't be surprised at some point if Apple's like, you know what, we're gonna say forget phones, we're gonna install a microchip into your eye, and guess what? Now it's gonna be called Google Eye or not Google, like Apple Eye, and be like, hey, guess what? Now we're gonna have you,
Yeah.
upgrade your
And you're
microchip.
just talking to your thumb because
Yeah, yeah.
there's going to be a chip in there too. But they had, tablet computers with fingerprint scanners and payment on a personal portable device
Right,
is
Google
also
Pay.
depicted, which is like, your Apple Pay or your Google Pay or whatever pay, But they're showing like all this tech, and these are all things that like we either have today or like we've had for a while now. Like we've had video chat for a while. We've had hands-free video games for a while.
I mean,
Wearable technology we've had for a while. Tablet computers we've had for a while. We've had these technologies for a while. This movie that was out in '89 had none of this.
right, and let's keep in mind on this too. Like, there's very few movies, TV shows, whatever, that actually can depict it accurately as best as they can. I mean, the
Yeah.
only other example is The Simpsons. That is the only other example that has actually depicted actual life events or things of that nature
The,
to that
the
degree.
Simpsons is on another level, and maybe that's a conversation for another day.
That
But
is another
I
conversation. But yeah,
mean, this tech, that they've shown is just it's crazy to think like you kind of take it for granted. Like you watch the movie, you watch part two, and they're like he's watching a TV on the, uh, you know, in the house, and you're like, oh, you're just watching TV. But like in '89,
right. Especially the way that it was like mounted
and you're
and
like, oh well,
everything
he's in
else.
2015, so it makes sense. But they made the movie in '89. They didn't know in 2015 that we would have flat screen TVs because they didn't know that that technology would even exist. Like flying cars. We don't have flying cars. Even though, yeah, Apple maybe be making a flying car, but it's not like you see them all
No,
around the
I
place.
mean, you're right, but I mean, I know you and I talked about it. I mean, there's probably, of course, there's prototypes, there's things into play that they have created, like certain vehicles that can like go on
But
water
we don't
and
have a
like.
sky highway.
No, I mean, now we did talk about that. I mean, it would be interesting, but I feel like the traffic would be.
Unless we do and we just don't see it.
Well, that's true because like I feel like the traffic up there would be worse, and then the ones that are
Yeah.
down below would actually be like, "Wow, this is actually a nice highway now. I could actually drive on
If
it."
there's a sky highway and this traffic is better, I would hate to see what the traffic is up there.
Oh yeah, no,
No.
I totally agree with you, Matt.
So there is an animated series, John, that really, really closely resembles Back to the Future.
And that is true. And I also know that we, in some ways, have been inspired by this as well with our own podcast in certain ways.
Yeah.
But what Matt's talking about is Rick and Morty. If you haven't seen it, it's a very interesting show. I will say it is not appropriate for probably under the age of like 17.
You know, it's one of those shows where it's funny, but it's not funny. It's right, but it's wrong. You know,
It pushes a lot of envelopes on a lot of different levels.
it's one of those like really weird, like you want to stop watching it, but you can't stop watching it at the same time. Like
It's weird because like I did that in the beginning when I first started watching it. I actually I think it was like season 3 or 4 that I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna watch it, and I binged watched a lot of it
Oh yeah, me
because it
too.
was so good at
Yeah,
the
me
time.
too. Yeah.
And I think right now they're actually coming out with I think it's season 6 in like October. I think is when it's coming out. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I'm probably
excited. I'm excited.
well, I'm gonna be binge watching that too because they're
Oh
gonna come
yeah.
out with all the episodes.
Yeah, I'm excited. But the concept for Rick and Morty was a concept that was actually called The Real Adventures of Doc and Marty, which is spelled Marti.
Right, which became Rick and Morty in that sense, which is interesting because if you start to look at the show itself, you look at Rick and you look at Marty. Rick, of course, very I would say as close as he can to Doc, and then Marty is really, of course, really close to Morty. And it, you know, when you start to look at the dynamic between them both, I mean, granted, you look at you know, Rick, he's a drunk alcoholic, you know, scientist. And then, you know, you look at Doc Brown and he's not even close to being like
Yeah, I
that.
mean, he's not a drunk, you know, yes, he's a scientist, and I think you know, you kind of do the comparison, right? Like Rick is a scientist, he's an inventor. Doc Brown is a scientist and he's an inventor. So you have those two components where Rick invents things that, you know, doesn't need to be invented. It doesn't work well. It always goes badly and they're not needed.
Right.
You have Doc Brown who invents things, they're not needed, they don't work, and they're not needed. It's a little bit different,
Right. And
but
then
they're very much the same.
but then if you look at Morty, right? So like Morty being this like at first I would say he's very timid.
I think
Right.
he's a dimwit, but
I mean, no, he is a
yeah.
dimwit. I mean, he just kind of gets himself with you know
Oh, geez.
right. I mean, he gets into this like scenario with Rick and you know, he has to find a way out of that situation. So he has to be the adult because Rick is just like, whatever, we'll figure it out. Or Rick has to kind of like you know, basically solve this situation, even though he created the invention, and then you know Morty does something stupid, and then he's like, all right, well, we got to figure this out together. Where you know you look at Marty, and he just, I mean, he's again, he's not a dimwit, but he's one of those characters that just basically, you know, he realizes it's a situation, and then but he figures it out on his own without Doc in a sense, and he's kind of doing his own thing, and then Doc's doing something else. You know, so it's like they're both
Yeah.
kind of having their own separate adventure, but both Rick and Morty were doing it together because Morty did something stupid. Rick's like, you know what? Well, let me fix it for you. Hold on a minute, or vice versa, because Rick has done you know some dumb things as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rick usually is the cause of his own. You know, Rick usually is mostly the cause of every episode, and then Morty's usually the morality of Rick, which Rick is usually the like he really doesn't care. I think you know, yes, there are you know, it more brings the multiverse and there's more parallels to Rick and Morty for the multiverse idea.
Right, and you know what's funny? Like, of course, Geeks from the Multiverse, right? So it's like, when we've talked about in the first episode on like multiverse, I mean, these guys bring it to another
Oh
degree.
yeah, with the portal gun and all that other stuff. But
But
like I think Rick in the sense of like Rick and Morty, like he really doesn't care
no, he
about
actually,
himself or his life in that like he just wants to create stuff, but like a lot of times he's really just trying to die. I mean most of the time he's trying to die, and then Morty's saving him half the time, and then he kind of like, okay, well I think I'll just keep going. You know
no,
what
it's
I
like a
mean?
reality check is really what
Yeah.
Morty's given him. And you know, I'm going to say this, man, and I know you may not agree, but sometimes I think you remind me of Rick with that morality piece. It just, I'm not saying you're going to kill yourself. I mean, that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is he's like, whatever, kind of. It's like it's not. He's more the hyperactive version of Eeyore because like he's not like I'm depressed and I'm doing this, but he's
I
more
think
like
yeah, I mean he's definitely more into like creating but not worrying about the repercussions of what he's creating.
right.
And Morty is on the other side where he's, I mean, usually Morty and his family are on the side of dealing with what the repercussions are of what he's creating because he lives in that house.
I mean, I will say that the real dimwit besides Morty is his dad.
Well, that's because his dad deals with every single thing. Like his
No,
dad
I
gets crapped
agree.
on by everything. But I mean, it's undeniable that like you look at Rick's character like with the white triangle hair and the overall look outside of like maybe the green puke drool thing that comes out of his mouth
Yeah,
and the
what?
and the
Yeah.
burp, but like he looks like Doc Brown and
Oh, I agree.
Morty,
That,
different clothes, different things, but like similar kind of personality to
to Marty.
Marty.
Yeah.
Even in the episode Get Swifty, which is the name of the font that we use,
Believe it or not.
believe it or not, um, he does show some musical ability. He's not great at it, but
Yeah.
there is some musical ability, which kind of goes with the personality, with Marty McFly.
I mean, in that particular episode, and the reason why I'm going to bring this up is because
Get Swifty.
you got to get swifty, right? So it's actually funny. My family has a Snapchat group that's called Swifty, but it's spelled I think it's SCHWIFTY. Or, I don't know, or Swiftly. I think it's called Swiftly. So we did that little pun off of that, and I'm just like, have you ever seen Rick and Morty? I don't know if you really want to be, attached to this, but I just thought it was funny. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Get Swifty though, like in a lot of those episodes, it's Rick really is a creative individual. I mean,
Yeah.
he literally has to go above and beyond and like really try to think, okay, how do I get myself out of this situation? And that was one episode that he literally was like basically telling them to go screw themselves. Is basically the best way to put it. But
Yeah.
like,
I mean, as it is, I mean, yeah, I mean, we're talking back to the future, but like with Rick and Morty, yeah, the show is adult animation. So if you're a kid, you should not watch it.
no.
I say should not watch it. I didn't say can't watch it, but should not watch it.
Let me put it this
But
way: make sure your parents approve of this well before you start watching it.
I would say if you're geeky at all,
Oh yeah,
if you're geeky at all, and you've bypassed watching Rick and Morty, shame on you because you need to go and watch it like today, tonight, right now.
right now, and actually, what you should do is binge watch it before season 6 because I guarantee you, every season is even more crazier than the last.
Well, and there's so much like geek culture references.
Oh
Like
yeah,
there's Back to the Future references, there's Terminator references, there's like I mean, they've made references to, Freddy Krueger. They've made so many different references. Like we can't even mention them all.
no, I mean that could be a
And
great idea for another episode. But
you
yeah,
you have to watch the show because if you're geeky at all, like the show is so great. But moving on, I think our last point
it should be the last point. Yeah,
in the Flash movie, which just came out.
which is on HBO Max now. If you
It's
haven't
on
seen
HBO Max. Don't watch it.
it, don't watch it because they spent money on it. It's fine.
Um, there is a reference to. I mean, I think he mentioned it 2 or 3 times in this movie, where because they basically the Flash, like we said before in the DC series, go watch that series of episodes. Um, it's all about Flashpoint, which Flashpoint, he goes back and changes something in the past, and it creates a multiverse.
Yep.
And so the Flash is now in a different multiverse. And in this version of the multiverse, Michael J. Fox was not in Back to the Future, but Eric Stoltz was.
So it's funny because Matt and I actually talked about like this, like a couple different scenes, but apparently, like for example, Michael J. Fox, instead of him being, of course, Back to the Future, he's somehow
I
the
believe they said he was in Top
Top Gun.
Gun.
Yeah, so it was weird because then you're like, okay, well, Tom Cruise, and then I'm like, okay, so what about like because I know you were mentioning what was it Star Wars, and I think a couple other things that they mentioned
I
in the
thought that
film.
they mentioned Star Wars, so I don't know if they said that Tom Cruise was in Star Wars because they mentioned several movies like in succession, so I kind of missed that part, but I do. They mentioned like Eric Stoltz in Back to the Future, and the guy that's sitting on the couch has a tattoo of Eric Stoltz on his leg, and he's like, "Well, what about this tattoo?" And he goes, "Well, the tattoo's upside down." And then he lifts his leg, and he's like, "Well, it's right side up. What about now?" And so, like, he
It's
he
just it's
he
just weird that you would
he
have like a tattoo of him, but
he
yeah,
he makes that connection, like, "Oh my gosh, I changed the multiverse, and now Eric Stoltz is Marty McFly." And he goes, "Well, what about Michael J. Fox?" He's like, "You mean like Great Balls of Fire, like Maverick, Top Gun?" He's like, "No, Tom Cruise." And I think that they mentioned like a couple other movies.
yeah. And now I'm curious because now I feel like I just need to watch it because of those particular scenes and just kind of get the references that Flash made in that movie. Because I mean, I couldn't tell you that there's plenty of TV shows, plenty of movies, and all this other stuff that Back to the Future has been mentioned because of it because of the
Yeah,
iconic status. I mean, granted, I've mentioned to Matt too that it's not on the same level as like Star Wars or Marvel where they're still continuing, they're still doing all this stuff, but I mean, it's iconic in its own right because of the nostalgia and because of how it's influenced a lot of clearly TV shows, a lot of movies, a lot of different things, and they mention it because they know that without these particular movies, a lot of the movies now I don't think would be anywhere near the same or anywhere even on that same level because there's very few movies that are
yeah.
that iconic.
Well, I mean, you think like Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher. Would that
Oh yeah,
movie
yeah.
even exist without Back to the
I
Future?
mean, it's true because I mean, it because it explores the whole butterfly
Yeah,
effect. I mean, even hence the name. But it's so true that again, if you haven't seen this movie, you're literally disservicing yourself and hopefully the others around you because they're going to be the ones that are saying, "Hey, why don't we stop what we're doing, pause this episode, and go listen to the or actually go watch it?" Because honestly, you're missing out on so much right now
yeah,
if you haven't seen it.
yeah.
But man, I think we're good, man. Because I'm telling you, I think Back to the Future, like I've already mentioned, is one of those iconic things. And if you clearly haven't seen it, just go do it, man. Just,
It's
just
definitely a staple of geek culture. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, go see it. Like if you have seen it,
just
go see it again. Like
or just wait until October 21st, man. Just make that your one day a year. You're like, yep, I'm putting it on the calendar. Back to the Future Day. Here you go.
it's coming up. It's coming
I
up.
mean, maybe we should do that, Matt. We can do
Hey,
that on a
Back to the
Saturday.
Future Day.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll do a little tribute or something. Who knows?
Hey, who knows?
But we appreciate you guys. We appreciate the support. Again, we always love, hearing from you guys. Actually, believe it or not, I know we had someone, message us, and yes, we will be getting back to you very shortly. So please don't think that we
Yes,
don't.
we will be.
So, and again, if you ever want to reach out to us with different episode ideas or just maybe different swag ideas, for our merch store, let us know because I know Matt's already got some requests in and stuff like that. And who knows, maybe there's going to be some things down the road too. Because I'm gonna take some lead on this, but I'm gonna be making some merch here too. I can't have Matt do all the credit for this, but
Christmas is coming, so we're gonna be making some Christmas specific items like ornaments and other stuff. So
well, well, yeah, and I
be on the
also
lookout for those.
well, the question is, do we want to mention next month, or are we not doing that?
I mean, I don't know if we'll have specific Halloween stuff, but
I mean, if we get a chance, we will try to, see if we can create it. If we can't, we're sorry, but we are trying to really definitely give you guys more stuff for Christmas right now. But Halloween, we'll try. If not, we'll try again next year. But as always,
Stay geeky.